Hello everyone, in this Huawei webinar. I am Peter Breyer, Technical Manager for SOLARKIT, and today we will mostly discuss the residential topics and the residential devices in the portfolio of the Huawei, because we will have another webinar this year about the C&I projects, so we will focus today on the residential side. First thing to think about is device compatibility, because of course when you are using different brands and you have a warranty issue, it's very hard to convince the manufacturers that it's their device indeed that is faulty and not the other brand. But Huawei made it easy for everyone, because in the residential sector they only accept their own batteries for their inverters, so you don't really have the option to choose otherwise, although it's not even recommended. So I think it's not a bad thing, because your client cannot start to convince you that he wants to use a different kind of battery with the Huawei inverter, because it's simply not possible. In the C&I sector, it's possible to use the C&I batteries with different kinds of inverters. It will require a third-party EMS device, so maybe not the preferable solution in most of the cases, but if you have a Huawei system already installed, then for sure with a Huawei C&I battery it will work wonderfully. And these devices can communicate within one ecosystem, so you don't need any additional EMS device to connect them together. Although it's important to mention that the logger for the C&I BESS solutions is different, so you cannot use one that you already have on site because you have a bigger park or something, several inverters connected to a smart logger. You cannot use that for the C&I BESS solution, but you will receive a new one with the C&I BESS order, and that logger you can use for the control of the inverters as well. Okay, so we have collected some tips for you that we want to share in this webinar. So the first of these would be to always choose the battery within the same brand. So this is what I have been talking about so far, that inter-brand compatibility is very important. You use one ecosystem, hence you have the development, like in the factory and the R&D centers, they develop these devices to work together with their own inverters. So this is a focused development. It's different compared to a brand which only manufactures, for example, batteries, and they manufacture it so it will be compatible with as many inverters as they possibly can do. Because then these batteries will not have the same goal as the manufacturer of the inverter, for example. So the functionalities will be not that much synchronized. As mentioned, in Huawei's portfolio, in the residential portfolio, it's not an issue because, first of all, they were paying a lot of attention when they created the new version of the Luna 2000 battery series, the C1 series, because it's compatible with the old devices as well. And the old inverters can work together with that battery pack, battery rack, without any additional device. I think that's a very good point and a very good way of doing business. Also worth to mention that the old battery packs, like the S1 series, it's also compatible with the new hybrid inverters. So it goes both ways. The communication, let's say, is universal within the Huawei portfolio, and you don't have to be afraid that you cannot choose one given device because you choose a different inverter, or if you want to replace an inverter, the batteries will not be compatible anymore. No, there is no such situation. So I think that's a very good business plan. And here is a portfolio about the most common residential devices. And the first thing that you can notice is that the L1 series from the single-phase inverter is changed to the LB0 series. This has a little bit of different power range. Also, very important note that the LB0 series has the startup voltage halved. So previously it was 100 volts, now it's 50. So basically you can start up the inverter with only 2 solar panels installed. And as mentioned previously, you can use any kind of Huawei batteries for that system, so very small system can already be installed with these inverters and will work as intended. Also worth to mention that with this reduction in the startup voltage, the inverter will start to produce sooner in the morning and will function later in the day when the sunshine is not that strong anymore. So basically it extends the working time of the inverter. This single-phase inverter ranges from 3 to 6 kilowatt, and then you have a new single-phase series as well. It's not as new as the LB0, but it's also a quite new series, like the LC0. It goes from 8 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt. And with these single-phase inverters, you can build a very good off-grid system because you don't need to worry about phase imbalance. And the asymmetry portion of the inverters sometimes cause a limitation in the system, right? Because only 33% of the nominal power can be used on one phase. However, if you have a one-phase system, then you don't have to worry about distributing the loads properly. You can just connect everything to that one single phase and worry about the overall load not to exceed the power output of the inverter, but it's way easier to calculate this way. These are for the single phase devices, and then let's go to the MB0. The MB0 has two main advantages. Previously, in Huawei's portfolio, the biggest hybrid inverter was 10 kilowatt, the M1 series. Now, with the MB0, is ranging from 12 to 25 kilowatts, so it's way higher power distribution, right? With the 25 kilowatt, you can easily parallel some devices and reach even 100 kilowatt in terms of AC output. I know that it varies from country to country where the residential threshold is given. For example, in Austria, I believe it's 30 kilowatt. In Hungary, it's 50. But with this device, you can quite easily max out this threshold and still connect batteries very easily and extend it modularly. So if your client wants only 5 or 7 kilowatt hours in the beginning, but later on maybe he would like to increase it, then it's a very good solution because from small modules you can stack up. So you are not that strict like when you want to install an AC coupled battery from Huawei. It starts from 97 kilowatt hours, which is already an industrial size and not very common in residential usage. So this is one of the advantages of the MB0, the higher power output and the higher power bins. And another important factor is that it has two battery inputs, so it's easier to extend with even more battery capacity in case it's needed. And in these kinds of scenarios where such a nominal power inverter is needed, it's easily imaginable that you need to use both of the battery inputs. Right. So the next two inverters are quite similar. The MAP0 series have two different kinds, the Sun 5000 series and the Sun 2000 series. Main difference is that Sun 5000 series can only be used with fully optimized systems, and the optimizers need to be from the Merck series. Like Huawei had previously the P450 and P600, and these series, or these optimizer series, can be used with the Sun 2000 MAP0. However, it's not required in that case to fully optimize the system. You can just use as many optimizers as you need on the given site. With the Sun 5000, you need to optimize every single panel in every single installation. But there is a huge upside that the warranty provided by the manufacturer, in that case Huawei, the manufacturer's warranty is extended to 15 years instead of the 10 years. So basically you get 5 extra years of warranty, and that is because most of the faults are induced by the DC side, by the PV side in the inverters. And with the full optimization of the panels, Huawei can reduce this kind of risks so they can provide a longer time for warranty. Also, these optimizers are equipped with thermometers, so you can see easily the temperature of each given panel one by one. So it's very easy to find if one panel has some kind of hardware problem or it's overheating, etc. So you can very easily spot this. Also, there is an option to set a panel output or bind a panel output to temperature. So for example, you can set if a panel reaches, I don't know, 80 degrees Celsius, then it will shut down and will not produce, it will bypass that panel. So this is a very smart solution. Of course, makes easier to troubleshoot later on. So if you realize that a panel is malfunctioning in a system where there are no optimizers, you need to check the panels one by one, or you need thermal imaging or some kind of extra work to determine which panel is the faulty one. In case of a fully optimized system, of course, you can very easily check which panel has the problem, even without going on site. And that's another advantage, right? So when there is a problem, troubleshooting is way easier and quicker. And also another advantage is that with fully optimized systems, you will increase the yield over the years. It's not significant every time or in every case, but even when it's only one part of roof and one inclination degree, and there is nothing that would influence the yield otherwise, or destruct the yield or diminish the yield, even the aerosols in the air could influence the yield of the solar panels, and these little imbalances can cause the yield to decrease a little bit. And with physical optimizers on the back of each panel, you will still increase the yield a little bit, a few percent by year. Of course, it varies from year to year and from installation to installation, but basically you can determine that it will produce more energy than it would without the optimizers. But that's, I think, is the smaller factor. The very big one is the 15-year manufacturer warranty. Also, there is a difference in terms of power output, because the Sun 5000 series is available from 8 to 12 kilowatt models, and the Sun 2000 is from 3 to 10 kilowatt models. So the second tip for this webinar would be to always check the guide for setting up the proper communication between the inverter and the batteries. All webinar attendees will get the guide in email afterwards. This is a quite long guide, and there are lots of documentations available for each Huawei device, and we know that it's sometimes easy to get lost in the mess of information. So for that reason, we will only send out the two most important pages that our clients are usually coming to us with questions. So the communication between the batteries and the inverters, and how should they make this communication, is still a question for a lot of our partners and for somebody who just starts to work together with the new Huawei devices. So for that reason, we looked up these two pages for you, and we snipped it, and we will just send these two important pages for you. Of course, every guide is available online and you can have the full guide, but in that case you don't need to look for the proper pages. You will have it in your mailbox. So when we take a first glance at one of these pages, we can see that there is a lot of information, not just about the battery and the inverter communication, but also with the connection of the smart guard, the backup loads, etc. So this is also, again, a lot of information that you don't necessarily need to consider. I mean, most of your questions are regarding only the battery communication, so you need to focus on the left side of this guide. And once you have looked it through, you will see that it's a very good and a very well built up guide and a very logical one. So it's quite easy to use once you have just looked it over a few times. And you will realize how easy it is indeed to create the connection between the inverter and the batteries. So the two types of the batteries, or the two models of the batteries, are different. So that's why we will send you 2 pages. Sorry, because the 2 batteries need to be installed a little bit differently. And of course, it's usually paired with the MAP0 inverter. So this is what we see. This is the most popular product at the moment in the residential area because of phase asymmetry, right? It's very important in many, many countries. Also, if you want to use or want to build a system that is able to seamlessly switch to off-grid situations, or when there is a blackout happening, seamlessly switch to off-grid operation, then you will need unbalanced or unbalanced output to properly function or to function at all in that situation. And there were some questions that we received before the webinar that we would like to answer during it, and we placed it in the slides where we think it's adequate. So the first question was, what are the lower and upper SOC values for the Luna battery? And the answer is 0% and 100%, because Huawei really names and gives the nominal power, nominal energy or nominal capacity of the batteries as it is. So they don't have any restriction, like you can only discharge to 10% or only discharge to 5%, otherwise you will lose the warranty, or it will not be able to discharge below that, etc. So there is no such restrictions. You can discharge the battery to 0% SOC and use it to charge up to 100%. And it's important because if you purchase a 5 kilowatt-hour battery module and the available capacity is really the nominal capacity, then you have 5 kilowatt-hours. If you would have only 90%, which is the case of in many manufacturers, then you would have only, of course, 4.5. Hence, the price you pay would be higher per kilowatt-hour in that case compared to one that is 100% usable, or like the SOC, the 100% of the SOC is usable. And another important note here, that when you reach 0%, that doesn't mean that the battery modules reach 0 volt. It means that it reaches the preset limit of the factory, like the BMS of the battery will stop the discharge, but there will still be voltage inside of the battery modules. So one battery module would be around 45, 42 volts in voltage, even when it's empty. When it's full, it would be around 52, I believe, but the exact values I would need to check. But it's not really important. The important part is that you can really use this kind of power output, and it's coming with the possibility to still take proper power out of the battery even when it reaches or closes to 0% SOC. And then let's talk a bit about the accessories, because there are a lot now, and you need to calculate with the correct amount of accessories, correct models of accessories, and also, very important tip, and this is the next one, with correct spacing. Why? Because these accessories are quite big now. For example, the Smart Guard is similar in size to an inverter, so that's why we brought a comparison. You can see on the left side there is a picture about the new 7 kilowatt-hour models of batteries, and above that you can see a single-phase Smart Guard, above that MAP0 inverter, and on the right an MB0 inverter. So this is why we showcase, like, this is our installation or our booth in an exhibition. So these are the devices in real life on the same cover, let's say, and you can see that the Smart Guard is taking up quite a lot of space. Also, you have to install a DC box, an AC box. It also varies from country to country. Maybe in some cases you can join these two boxes and put them into one. It depends on the local regulations, but you will need a lot of wall space for a system that you want to install with batteries, with inverter, with Smart Guard, with junction boxes, and that requires proper planning, right? Because when you sell a system to a customer and then you realize on the site that there is not enough space in the room and you have to go through another wall and cable it together, it becomes a bit messy and the customer will also be frustrated. You will also have extra work, so it's important to plan with the proper spacing. Then we have the next device, the smart logger, which is mostly used in C&I applications, and I partially talked about it. The reason why it's here, it's also like a good point of measurement. Like, I believe many of you have used the smart logger before, so here you can see the size of the smart logger on the wall as well in our exhibition, so you can compare the other devices to the logger size. And also, the reason why it is here, I wanted to give it another like half slide, just to remember when you order a C&I BESS solution, then a new smart logger will be delivered with that, and you need to use the new one. So the old version you cannot use in the C&I batteries. That's a very important one. And next up, we have the Wi-Fi dongle, because currently the MEP0 doesn't include in the packaging the Wi-Fi dongle anymore, like the M1 series used to include that. The reason for that is that even the EMMA, even the dongle, and even the smart guard can connect to the Wi-Fi, and the manufacturer doesn't know your system in advance, right? So it depends from the use case which one you will need to connect to the Wi-Fi. And that's why it's not included anymore in the packaging, because you don't want to purchase it every time when you don't want to use it or you cannot use it. But it's very important to keep in mind also, because if you need it, then now you need to purchase it separately, because if you have a system that is not connected to the cloud, then it's very hard to do proper maintenance, to see if there is any malfunctioning. The clients will not check daily the LED lights on the inverter, most probably. So it's important to note that if you need a dongle or not with the orders. And then the smart guard, because, or sorry, not the smart guard, the smart meter, because previously you get accustomed to, when you order a smart meter from Huawei, you receive, or for Huawei, you receive a Chint DTS-2 or DDS-2 depending on if 1 or 3 phase, because that was the manufacturer for Huawei. But now, to create a more stable supply, Huawei also picked up some new manufacturers on his list, and also purchased it. Like, the smart meters are not produced by Huawei themselves, it's produced by another factory, and Huawei purchases it, and when they ask to manufacture these kind of devices, they provide the proper communication presets for that factory. And these devices would work the same way. Like, for example, you will receive YSDM meters when you order a smart meter for Huawei, not just Chint. You will receive this new brand as well. It will look quite similar, but you will notice that it's not the same exact device. But you have nothing to worry about, like it has to be connected in the same way, or at least a very similar way, and you need to set it up the same way, and the functionality will be the same, the price would be the same. So there is really not a lot of difference, but just to avoid any misunderstanding, that's why we want to clear that these are also the same Huawei approved smart meters, and it's coming directly from Huawei. Like, we don't need to purchase it from the manufacturer that Huawei recommends, we purchase it directly from Huawei. And then we have the EMMA. And EMMA is a quite new one and quite good device as well. Of course, it's a bit more expensive than the other accessories like the Wi-Fi dongle or the smart meter. The reason for that is that it includes both of the functionalities. So EMMA serves as a flow-through meter as well, and also can be connected to the Wi-Fi. So if you have an EMMA in a system, then you don't need the smart meter anymore and don't need the Wi-Fi dongle anymore. Also, it's very important to note that if you connect to an EMMA and then you also try to use a Wi-Fi dongle, then the system will get confused and the communication will be not functioning as intended or not be functioning at all. So please don't try to use both of them in the same system. Also, it's not worth it because you will have to invest a bit more money to purchase both of the devices, when in reality you only need one of them. So I would recommend to be honest, to go with the EMA in most of the cases, because it's not only a smart meter and Wi-Fi connection, but it's also like a smart home control. So this can be developed further, like connect with smart loads, etc., or connect with SG-ready heat pumps. So this device is way more advanced than the simple smart meter and the Wi-Fi dongle. If you have an EMA in the system, then the control would be through EMA. So also the commissioning you need to do through the EMA and not through the inverter or the dongle. And then for the smart guard, there is also a very important part in the user manual. And I know that the user manual is very long and contains a lot of information, but this is a very important part. You can look up the table 5.3 in the user manual, and you will see which port you have to connect with which inverter when you are using a smart guard. This is again here because a lot of you came with that question, like, hey, I have 2 inverter inputs there, to which one do I connect my device? And this is the table where it's written which device you have to connect to which port. So if you open the user manual, I recommend to just search for this table, and you can very easily check whether you have to connect to inverter 1 or inverter 2 input. In the smart guard, you have the grid connected to one input, and then you have the inverters connected as input, and you have several outputs, like you have the simple grid output, where you just want to use these phases when the grid is available, and then you also have the backup output. This would be the output where if you connect the household to that output and the grid have a blackout, then the inverter will still supply the home loads as long as it has enough power in the batteries or from PV. For this installation, of course, you would need batteries because PV is quite unstable, so it will only be possible to maintain proper power supply with batteries. But these 2 ports you can use to supply your home loads. And we recommend to connect everything to the backup load, because basically you will have no disadvantage with that. And on the top of the smart guard, there is a switch that you can turn down if you want to exclude the whole inverter system from the side, because there is some kind of hardware malfunction or anything. Then you can connect the household directly to the grid and supply like the inverter is not even there. And that switch will also supply not just the grid output, but the backup output as well. So another very important note, that the smart guard contains an EMA. So if you purchase smart guard, you don't need to purchase an EMA as well. You will use the one in the smart guard, and you don't need to purchase an EMA and put it in the smart guard and assemble it there. The smart guard will already contain it, and it will be pre-wired. You just have to connect the communication with the inverter, and that's it. Otherwise, you don't have anything to do with the EMA. Of course, you need to connect it to the Wi-Fi as well, but you have to do that independently from the smart guard. So anywhere you put an EMA, you need to connect it to the Wi-Fi. It's not necessary, like it's not mandatory, it's a better phrase. It's not mandatory to connect it to the Wi-Fi, but you will only have the system in the cloud available if you connect that to the Wi-Fi. And there is another question from the Q&A, like for 3-phase smart guard, can the backup and non-backup be wired so that only 1 or 2 phases are connected? And if I understand correctly, this question was regarding if can you do like 2 phases on the backup output and 1 phase on the grid output, and it would be the same 3-phase from the house, or you use the same 3-phase from the house that was installed before. But in that case, the neutral line will be common for the 2 ports, and I think that would cause a problem. So it's not really possible to use it that way, and there is not really a point to use it that way, because you can just connect all 3 phases to the backup side and your whole house would function from backup. I think whoever wrote that question was thinking about that switch that I mentioned is on the top, where you can connect the grid directly to your household and exclude the inverter from the system. And maybe he was afraid or worried that this switch would only power the grid output. However, it does power the backup output as well. Of course, if you switch that or turn that switch down, so the household is powered only from the grid, and there is a blackout on the backup output, you will have no power at all. But you can still use that quite safely or 100% safely for supplying the household, because you connect all of the 3 phases to the backup port, and if the inverter has a malfunction, you just turn down the switch on the top right of the smart guard and use all the power from the power grid. Or if the power grid has a blackout, the inverter will supply all of the 3 phases in the household, and you will have electricity in both cases. Another question was, when using a smart guard, if a power outage is intentional, caused, for example, by the fire department, can a disabled signal be sent to the smart guard to prevent switching to backup mode? And the answer is, it's only possible if the system is fully optimized. Like, of course, you have the switch on the inverter, like you can switch it off physically there, and you can send an online command, but that's maybe not possible anymore, because if there is a fire, it's easily imaginable, or it's imaginable that the Wi-Fi router is already damaged, so there is no Wi-Fi connection anymore on the site. But if the system is fully optimized, you can use input port where you can connect like a big red button, and with short-circuiting that, you can turn off the whole system. The optimizers will reduce the voltage immediately under the PV, so there would be no voltage on the DC line either. And then you will not have any power in the inverter either. The next tip is to always install a fully optimized system if possible. So one of the reasons is that rapid shutdown possibility. Also, in some regions, it's required to install such a system that can reduce the voltage under the PV in case of a fire. So it's exactly the reason for some regions why it's a requirement, not just an option, but it's a requirement, and you need to do it that way. But of course, there is also there that you get 5 extra years of warranty, and also the easier maintenance. And also, in case like solar equipment is long-term investment, right? So it's possible that something changes in the surroundings of your house. For example, there would be a tree, there would be a communication cable somewhere going on the streets high enough that it can cause some shadow or cast some shadow into your roof. So in case of any environmental changes and a little bit of shadow would be cast on your roof, the system will still work properly because it's fully optimized, and it's way cheaper to install the optimizers when the whole system is being installed than install them when the system is already there. You have to remove all of the solar panels, install the optimizers, and then reinstall all of the solar panels. It would require a lot of extra costs from the side of the investor. So these would be the most important parts of a fully optimized system. And if the customer is paying the higher CAPEX costs, then it's a very good solution. Of course, you need to convince the customer that it's a good investment for him because it will increase the initial cost of the system. And there was another question that what is the real lifetime of the Luna 2000 range of batteries? And we can only say that the warranty is 10 years because the company is not older than 10 years, our company. So we don't have batteries installed that are older than the warranty period. And we expect the batteries to last around 13-15 years because the battery degradation gets quicker once the battery reaches a certain point. But it's very important for the manufacturer to have all the batteries working when the warranty period ends, because if they have to exchange some batteries within the warranty period, it would be very costly for them. Of course, there is always a few malfunctioning devices, as these are technical articles. There would always be some kind of defect, but the important thing is to keep possibly 99% out of these defects. And if the warranty year or the warranty period is 10 years, then we can expect that the batteries will indeed be usable quite a bit longer than that, because then the manufacturer can safely provide the 10-year warranty. The reason why we expect 13 years is because, as I mentioned, it gets quicker, the degradation gets quicker with time, and after that 13 years, I think it would be beneficial to replace the old batteries with new ones. And another question was C&I inverter feed to the grid problem. Inverters of 40 and 50 kilowatt perform technical feed to grid even when the setup is set to no feed to grid. Is it possible to reduce it? It's absolutely possible. If the measurement is correct, then it's most probably because there are some kind of loads on the side which are turned off and consume a lot of power while they are working and shut down immediately. And the inverter cannot reduce its power that quickly. So it requires some kind of tolerance zone. And this is preset in the zero export to grid setting. I'm not sure about the value, but it's preset originally in the factory or in the R&D center. And you can use, instead of the zero export mode, a limited power mode and enter a negative value. What this would mean is that the inverter will always take let's say you set it to 100 watts, negative 100 watts, and that would mean that the inverter will always take the first 100 watt from the grid and then start to supply the required amount after that 100 watt. And this would leave the inverter with a tolerance zone, so if a consumer is turned off, then the inverter can start to reduce its power output, but because it had an extra 100 watt buffer, let's say, then it has a bit more time to reduce its power and the energy will not flow back into the grid. You need to find the correct amount from side by side. Like this one is pre-programmed as mentioned in the zero export limitation, but this is calculated with the most common cases. Let's say, like, the manufacturer doesn't know what kind of devices would be or what kind of loads would be on a site where you plan to install the machines, and they do a lot of calculations and they try to come up with a value that would be beneficial and optimal for 90 or 95% of the installations. However, there are some different cases where you need to increase that power. And if you go to this limited power output, then you set, for example, in this size, I think the best option would be to start with negative 1 kilowatt or negative 0.8 kilowatt. And I think you will see that the feed-in would stop immediately. Then you can start to reduce this number like with 100 watt steps and see where the feed-in is realized and which one was the limit. And you can also start it from the bottom, like you start with negative 100 watt. But of course, in that case, first, until you test it out, the proper value, you will also feed back a little in that time period. So I would recommend to set a quite high value at first and then reduce that value every week when you see there is no injecting into the grid. And that was most that I wanted to share with you in this webinar. This slide is the Hungarian side, but of course we have our web shop available in English and in many languages as well. So the important thing is that this would be uploaded into the web shop if you are registered you can watch these videos without any additional cost, of course. And we try to upload as many educational content as we can. So it's worth to check out the other videos as well. The installation of the MAP0, the commissioning. These are, I believe, very, very useful tools for you, especially if it's your first installation with a given device. You just check the video the previous day and you will have at least some kind of memory how to install the system, even though you haven't installed one yet, but it greatly helps the first installations. Also, we do unboxing videos where we show you what is included in the packaging. So when you are designing a system, you will know exactly what to purchase and what you need to purchase separately because it's not in the packaging, let's say. So these are the most useful contents, I believe, on the webshop. So thank you very much for joining our webinar today, and see you later this year when we will hold the webinar about the C&I products. See you next time.